We're going to go ahead and get started. I know we're going to have people still coming in here, but I want to be conscious of time. And let me just tell you how this came about. One of the things that was clear to me before I became governor, and for those of you that are president this year, like Colleen from Dundee Township, she's heard from me a lot. Our ability to raise money says how much good we can actually do. And we raise a lot of money. You know, we did some work earlier in the year, and we figured out that on average, our clubs raise somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. Now, I got to tell you, my club is on the low end of that. It's way lower than that. But there are a number of clubs that are very successful and are raising well over $100,000 a year. If we could find a way to raise more, we could do more good. So that was what I was saying back in March last year when we had PETS, the President-elect training. A week after PETS, all this nonsense hit. And the plans that we had in place, and many of the fundraisers that all of your clubs have, had to be canceled, reimagined, or you had to come up with entirely new and different ideas. As a result of that, there were a lot of people I know that were just trying to see what was available, what help was available on the internet, and I was one of them. There were a number of seminars that I went to. One was sponsored by a group called Greater Giving. And Greater Giving had this terrific speaker, Samantha Swaim, talking about your events and what your event should be in a virtual world. But then there was a lot of discussion about once we get out of all of this, and we're going to get out of this, there are still aspects of virtuality that are going to be of real value to you, and you ought to consider taking advantage of them. Now, over this year, we had clubs that were tremendously creative, and I'm going to highlight some of those a little later on. Some clubs were able to take their normal fundraiser and just put it online, and that worked pretty well. And there were clubs whose fundraisers honestly weren't impacted at all. You know, if I look at Batavia, who has a Corvette raffle and has done it for, I don't know how many years, that really wasn't impacted. But for those that were impacted, we're still looking for new ideas. So that's why we're here tonight, is to have the opportunity to take some new ideas. And Sam, with that, I will turn this over to you. Samantha Swaim is a veteran of 20 years of the work in fundraising. She has a clientele nationwide across North America. She is based in Portland. And she'll tell you more about their business and really about what she's learned over these years as we go through this. So, Sam, I hope that's an okay lead in. I'm going to turn it over to you.
That's a very generous lead in. Thank you, Lyle. I appreciate it. And kudos to all of you. Lyle and I had the opportunity to chat earlier, and he was telling me all the incredible ideas that Rotary has explored, has tried, has succeeded at. And I'm just super impressed because I think that this is a time of innovation in a space where it's been kind of the same for a long time. We've had a lot of the same models of fundraising and the same models of events, but I want to share some slides. So let me get those up real quick. And I want to kind of just start at the very beginning of just the basic building block of fundraising events, because events are not necessarily the easiest way to raise money. They're very time consuming, but there is a great reward in raising money via events, which is why a lot of people rely on events. And at that base, there are three key reasons why people give. So Susan Hellett is a researcher out of Seattle who's researched with the University of Washington for years, trends in giving, why people give. And I think at the heart of it, we all instinctually know that people give because they want to make a difference. But equally valued for folks, and sometimes even more valued for folks, is that giving allows them to be a part of something. It allows them to feel in community. And I think that that is more necessary now than ever before. I think that we're in a time where people have been feeling isolation and deprivation. And so being included and being a part of something is a huge driver for why people give. And the other base of that is being celebrated, recognized, seen as a good member of society, as a generous contributor, as someone who is supporting and giving to the community around them. So not just to make a difference, but also to be celebrated for their giving and to be a part of something becomes a giant motivator for why people show up and give at events. Because in an event setting, you can accomplish all three of these quite easily. Rarely are people showing up to the pancake breakfast because they can't find pancakes anywhere else. They're showing up to the pancake breakfast because it is an opportunity to be in community with other people and to give and support and make a difference. So the drivers for folks about giving have always been these three elements. All of Susan Howlett's research has pointed toward this. Penelope Burke is another fundraising researcher out of Toronto who also has found these are the three drivers for people in making giving decisions. We have always adopted these three elements into every event that we plan. My organization, Swaim Strategies, is a consulting firm that works specifically on nonprofit fundraising events. That's what we consult on. How do you make more money? How do you make them more impactful? And when COVID hit and we knew we had to adopt something new, the very first thing we did was come back to our basic building blocks and look to how do we make these three things happen. And I suspect that going forward, these are the three things that we're going to need to continue to move forward and think about how we make people feel a part of something, that we make them feel seen, and we show the impact that they're having. So when we started to adopt the virtual event space, the first thing we saw a lot of was both our own organization and many other organizations out there were trying to just replicate the event in a virtual setting. How do we have a social hour? How do we get people together and make cocktails? How do we replicate the same games and activities? And very quickly, we learned that some of these things worked and some of these things didn't work. But asking for money and raising money where we recognize people was working really, really well. So we saw some immediate successes in virtual events. All of a sudden, there was a much more diverse audience attending. We were no longer limited to the people within our community showing up for this event. We now were reaching the brother-in-law that lived across the country and the friend and neighbor, and we were reaching all new audiences. The other thing we found that we were reaching was we started to actually reach the folks that we were impacting. And so people tuning into these events were not just our donors, but were also the clients that the mission served, the folks that were receiving the resources that were being raised. So all of a sudden, there's a much more diverse audience in attendance. There was ease of access. People could participate from anywhere. I didn't have to be in your town to be able to participate in the event. There were no longer barriers. I didn't have to buy a ticket. I could simply tune in and participate. And all of a sudden, we noticed that planning time dropped. The cost to produce the event was significantly cheaper, and we were still meeting and even exceeding revenue goals. There was also this big shift that happened where it became much more community-centric versus just being about our big donors showing up. This became like a big open door, come one, come all. And that, I think, is an opportunity that we need to think about as we start gathering again, is how do we continue to open the doors and let folks in and engage folks? So the best success we found in the virtual landscape was to treat a virtual event like a television show. It allowed the participants to view in a comfortable environment where they could sit back, have their, whether it's Guinness or Murphy that they want to pour for the night, and they can enjoy and watch and observe the event happening. But we needed a way to still allow people the opportunity to engage. And so the two engagements that we found most active were chat, engaging in a chat function like in today's Zoom chat, which I should open, so if anyone has questions, we can see them. And in addition, we found that giving in a way that allowed for names to be recognized and allowed for our donors to be seen as a part of the community. So we started producing the short, less than 60 minutes, very story-based program focused about how we were impacting and making change and why giving was so important. The interesting thing about this time was everyone was innovating. So I think there was a lot of people, there was a lot of willingness of audience members to try, to join you and experiment, to try new things with you. The other thing that we found almost immediately is that individual giving during this time went up, significantly up. Mostly what we heard was donors weren't trusting government, they weren't trusting institutions like health institutions, but they wanted to make an impact, they wanted to be of service, they wanted to be a part of community. And giving to a cause that they believed in was a way to do that. So you'll see on this screen here, we have donor names being recognized as the thermometer is rising. So throughout the program, every time a donor gave, we were showing their name on the screen and we were showing a thermometer rising. There were a couple of other things that we started to learn quickly in the virtual space. One is that auctions were not doing well as a live auction. And that's because there's a delay. People have to be bidding while they're watching the program. There's sort of competing engagement. But the other thing we discovered was that people were consuming auctions differently in an online space. They were shopping auctions like a catalog or like Amazon, where you read the reviews and you look at all the photos. And so people were spending more time on each auction package and bidding actually higher. 84% of value became the average auction package, where when we had big galas and balls, we had auctions selling in a live auction for about 110% of value, and in a silent auction only at about 40% of value. So now you put them all into one online catalog and they're averaging 85% of value. That was a remarkable shift that we saw. We also found that we could eliminate technical difficulties by pre-recording all of our speakers. So easily with the use of a cell phone or Zoom, you could have a speaker deliver their speech, pre-record it, and we could load that up into the program, whether it be that we're showing content on PowerPoint or we're live streaming content. We could load that video up and have it ready to go without the technical connection needing to be made. We didn't have to worry if people were tuned in or not. We always had a live host though, because we wanted the host to be able to actively acknowledge giving and celebrate gifts as they came in. The benefit that we found was that all of a sudden we were able to not just show the names, but the auctioneer was able, or the host was able to see the names and say them out loud as well. And all of a sudden we were doing donor stewardship live in the moment, reaching all three of those goals, where we could show the impact that they were making, we could make them feel a part of community, we could make them feel known for their giving. And this is the piece that I think we will carry into how we gather in person again. We will no longer be bid paddles in the back corner of the room. We'll now be names recognized for our giving. In the virtual space, the other key critical component was we found that we needed one sort of event landing page where everything lived in the same place. If we asked people to click away or go to other pages, we lost viewership. And so having it all in one location became kind of a critical piece of the component. We partnered with a resource that I want to share with you, a production company called the AV Department. Just like when you were in high school and you used to call the AV guys to roll down the TV or the slide projector, the AV department is a company that has been working with organizations around the country to live stream. And when they produce your live stream, they also produce your single event page for you. So they host your viewing landing page. And they're very affordable, $3,500. And when you consider the cost of ballrooms and catering and things like that, it was a very affordable option to be able to do a live stream event with a production company that managed all the technical stress. Additionally, that opportunity to steward donors in real time. This is the giving thermometer through Greater Giving. You can see that our host, Kelly Russell, is acknowledging and recognizing donors as they come in, and those donor names are appearing on the screen. This became a crucial key point, and we started seeing that when we pulled the names up, giving went up. When we took them down, giving stopped. When we put them back up, giving started again. When we took them down, giving went away. So that ability to have your name recognized is clearly a driver for folks. They want to get their gift in when they know that it's going to be seen and recognized. The other thing that was really compelling about this format is that a thermometer created collective action. And so that was really driving for folks who had the capacity to sort of swoop in as a superhero and make a donation at the end to close that gap. So a lot of donors started doing things like, I know I already gave $1,000, but I'm going to give another 500, or I really want to close that gap. So we started seeing repeat gifts. We also started seeing a back gift where an auctioneer might be going giving level by giving level by giving level. And in the room, if you raise your paddle at that level, that's the dollar amount you're giving. In this environment, no matter what level the auctioneer was at, someone could still donate at a higher amount. And that became a really compelling piece that I think we'll start to see in the hybrid space or in-person gathering, is how do we still give donors the flexibility to give at the level that is motivating to them, to have their name recognized and to have their name seen toward a collective action like a thermometer. So some of the old tricks we had were bid paddles in the room. I suspect we might start to see new tools as we start to gather again. The other key sort of strategy element in that fundraising was that we discovered having pre-committed gifts at the top levels assured that we knew donors were going to tune in and give at those opening levels. So we never had a moment where we said, we're hoping you'll make a donation, and then crickets. We always knew that the pre-committed gift assured that donors were going to be coming in right at the top. They were going to be making some of those bigger gifts that maybe took some convincing and a direct conversation, but that created momentum, it created energy, it created excitement in the room. That is when we started to see giving really pick up, and surprise giving really picked up at the $1,000 level, where all of a sudden lots of people were joining in the fun. Of course, as the levels got lower, the giving, more and more people were jumping in, and all of a sudden we saw new donors entering the picture, especially at those lower levels, $100, $250, $500. So we started looking for matching gift opportunities, like a donor or foundation that could match 10 gifts at this level or double your giving at this level, that we could use in the mid-range to really incentivize folks who were just jumping in the pool to move up their giving, and a lower level incentive, like everyone who gives at the $100 level will be entered to win 2 tickets to this upcoming thing. That type of incentive, or an overnight stay or a getaway or something like that, became a real big driver for like new donors at the $25, $50, $100 level who hadn't given before. So a little bit of pre-planning in that ask and how we asked really started to see impact. And all of a sudden our nonprofits were looking at their data and saying, we're seeing a massive shift. Our regular donors are showing up and giving even more, and now we're getting a whole bunch of new donors showing up and supporting the work that we're doing. So powerful stuff, and not just for the appeal, I think it became powerful for the storytelling as well. So we started breaking down, how do we effectively develop a TV show that shares the program in a compelling fashion, short enough that you actually can accomplish your fundraising and have a program that keeps people engaged. And we found that people stuck around for about 55 minutes and then they dropped away. And so we wanted all of our programming to be less than an hour. We usually spent the first few minutes with a welcome, here's how to participate, some sort of opening, whether it be musical or in nature, or a community source content like board members all welcoming people to the event, something that was sort of the warm up phase before we dove into about 15 minutes of content just about the organization, just the story of you, your work, what is the difference you're making in the world, and how are you doing it at this time? I think the big question we heard from donors a lot was, I want to know that if I'm giving to you, that you're still going to be around in 3 months, in 6 months, because so many businesses are closing right now. We want to make sure that our gift is making an impact into the future. So this is where we started putting together video storytelling, executive director or board chair speeches that really helped the audience to understand the impact and helped to understand how the organization was moving forward during COVID. Then we gave 20 minutes to the fundraising. The fundraising was a live host who could share the names and recognize donors, who could incentivize donors with challenges or matching gifts, and can really push folks to give. Now, this photo is a great example of the tool we have found easiest to use because it's free, and it's called Give Lively. It is a text to give platform. It takes 3 steps to set up. It's pretty simple. And once you have it set up, people can text the code, like in this case, text Prospera to 44321, and automatically receive back on their cell phone the giving donation link where they select their dollar amount, they enter their name and their credit card, and all of a sudden their name appears on the screen. And when their name appears on the screen, it's in this little stack of names. The top name gets replaced and all the names come down. So it's a constant addition of a new name, and the numbers are slowly crawling up, filling that thermometer. So easy tool, we love it. It became a very effective way to move giving. And then once we ended our giving, we always ended with some sort of note of celebration or keynote or entertainment, something that left our viewers on a high note. And oftentimes during that time, we'd see a little bit more giving. So we'd recognize those gifts before we close for the night. And then we thank everyone and send them to buy raffle tickets or participate in the auction. Anything that was more transactional, we sent them as, this is the way you can continue to contribute. We found viewers were watching programs for days after the event. And so having an auction or a raffle that closed 5 days later or 4 days later allowed for us to have viewers still participating and have a direction of how they can participate. And then we did a countdown. Our auction closes in 3 days, 2 days. Today's the last day. It closes at noon. Congratulations to all of our auction winners. And we found that bidding was quite high in that environment. The tool we use most for our online auctions is Greater Giving. Very lovely, robust tool that does both the thermometer and the online auction. Another benefit of the virtual space is that we found sponsors who said, I am in for virtual because I can participate from my home. I don't have to attend so many events a year. This is a safe way for me and my employees to participate. And I actually have more benefits because you have so many different places you can show logos. So all of a sudden there was this new engagement. Sponsors were excited and on board. And the nice thing is if you're pre-recording content, you can easily include a TV commercial or a promotion for your sponsor as a word from our sponsor, a message from our sponsor, just like the days of the Jerry Lewis Telethon. We're going to take a break and have a message from our sponsor. So all of a sudden there was this new way to engage businesses in participating in fundraising. So out of all of that, we saw auctions selling at about 80% of value, which is about twice what they were doing in silent auction world. We saw the fundraising appeal, that ask, that big contribution moment, bringing in 120% of what they had brought in last year. It was 80% less time to plan, 75% less cost to plan because we weren't feeding people and bringing people together. We saw 20% of our audience was new donor members, and donors were willing to pay attention for about 50 minutes, and then we saw a drop off. So there's some things in here that as I look to the future, I think we're all experiencing Zoom fatigue. No one wants to live in Zoom land forever. People want to be in person again, but what can we adopt here that we take forward? And how do we use the Zoom experience to still meet people where they're at and reach audiences, even if they aren't comfortable coming out in public for gatherings? Good question, Dan. Dan's asking, did putting up donor names drive away small donors? It did not. The thing that I love about Give Lively is that you can actually opt to be anonymous. So if folks did not want their name read or recognized, they just check the anonymous box. But we highly recommend acknowledging all donors at all levels. That's why we dedicated 20 minutes of time to it, because it values every gift the same. And we saw so many donors coming in at other giving levels. Sometimes if we got low, like dollar amounts that were $10, $5, we would just read, and we have all these awesome donors coming in at other dollar amounts, and we just start with name, and we wouldn't acknowledge like at $5, at $4, just to save on time mostly. But lots of new donors coming in, and that was exciting to see. The other question was, how did you advertise the TV show? So that's an interesting question, because that's a piece that I think is going to be critical. Usually our secret sauce is 7 touches. You need 7 pushes of marketing content in front of people before they act. But everyone's coming in on that 7 timeline at a different point. They might miss your first 2. And so we usually are doing a series of about 15 communications going out so that it's in people's purview. And around the 7th one, that's when people act. Well, in this space, the #1 way that we got people to tune in was that we actually put the meeting and the link on their calendar. So we sent them a meeting invite in the same way that you might have today's Zoom call on a calendar for a meeting invite. We had organizations emailing donors with a meeting invite to have the link directly on their calendar so it was easy to tune in. And that was by far the most effective. But we still had a lot of partners that paired up with TV stations. So much was canceled, like live programming was canceled, that so many TV stations at the time were scrambling, and even now still have space available. So they're willing to give space to nonprofits to be able to do their events. So there's marketing opportunity there. Sending old-fashioned postcards, invitations, still very effective. I think receiving something in the mail was almost unique, and so it became really compelling too. And Cheryl, I see your question about, do you recommend going hybrid in the future to attract in-person and out-of-area folks? I do, and that's what I'm going to dive into now, because I think that that's what we're moving into, is that we're moving into a time where people are really gathering again. And the interesting shift that we saw, this is a sort of revenue map that we use to highlight what's possible in a gala fundraiser. There's lots of different models of fundraising events, pledge-based fundraisers like walks, really transactional fundraisers like raffles. But in a gala format, that's where we have the most diversity of revenue. And there's all these types of revenues and games and silent auctions and all kinds of things we can do. Above this map, you'll see on the top of the bar are all relationship-based revenue items, and on the bottom are all transactional-based revenue. And that usually divides into our pre-event revenue. So pre-event, we were selling sponsors, table sales, ticket sales, and often receiving a cash contribution for in lieu of attendance. Then day of event, we had all these activities, that special appeal paddle raise, the live auction, the silent auction, all sorts of raffles and games. And all of those were often sort of their own bucket, with the live auction and special appeal being very focused on who you knew, who you had a relationship to, who was already a donor to the organization. And all those transactional items like silent auctions, raffles, games, were all really focused on the stuff and having a reward in hand. And so in this virtual space, a lot of these went away. I crossed out live and silent auction here. Live and silent auction got merged into online auction. But really, the 2 giant buckets of revenue we still saw were sponsor dollars and the special appeal. Those were the 2 big buckets, and some cash contributions that came in from folks who said, I can't attend, but I'm willing to donate. And they would give early to the thermometer. So now as we start to think about hybrid, that's the buzz. That's the thing that everyone's talking about, is how do we do this in a hybrid space? And I think that we're going to start to see this in all kinds of ways. Graduations are happening right now in a hybrid space where small groups are gathering in person and then it's being broadcast to bigger audiences. We're starting to see fundraising events also move into hybrid spaces. I'm a big fan of that, because I think that we're going to have a diversity of audience. All of a sudden, we're going to have people who feel really comfortable talking to people because they've been isolated and they can't wait to be in community. And we're going to have folks who feel really uncomfortable because they still feel like there's a health risk for them. So I love the idea of hybrid because it meets donors where they're at. And I want to give just a little advice about regathering people, but I want to frame it by telling you I am not a doctor, I am not a lawyer. You should still seek your own advice. But in the event sector, we've been doing a lot of risk assessment, trying to figure out how we safely gather people again. And the number one thing I recommend for your organization when you're thinking about gathering is, what is your risk tolerance? Meaning, do you feel protected, and do you feel like you are making choices that are keeping people safe before you decide, yeah, we're just going to do what we always did? I have a feeling that what we always did might be really a slow transition back. I don't think we're going to see 500 people in a ballroom for a while. Walks and runs, outdoor like pancake breakfasts, raffles, yes, I think all of those are returning a lot faster than the like enclosed big gathering space. There is a resource that you can go to called healtheducationservices.net. They have a free training for in-person events and how to essentially be COVID compliant. So there is something called duty of care. Duty of care is what we follow when we gather people together, that are fire marshal laws, that are food handling laws. It means that we're taking care to gather people safely, and duty of care still falls into place around COVID. And so I think it's important to start to think about how we do it safely versus simply doing what we've always done. So that's sort of my little flag, and my warning is to think about those. There's a couple of considerations. Venues are changing what they can do. So I think if you have had events in restaurants, in ballrooms, in event spaces, I think you have to consider what their changes are, and you have to have a conversation with them to understand what's possible. Do they have enough space for registration? Do they have new HVAC systems? I can hear noise in the background of someone's mic, but these are all considerations I think you have to consider for the venue, because every venue is going to have different regulations, especially because we have a lot of like national venues that will have different guidelines that are local venues, like hotel ballrooms might be different. Additionally, we know that CDC guidelines keep changing, and county guidelines and state guidelines keep changing. It's not linear. We've seen everything open and then close back up. So I'm a big fan of not signing huge commitment contracts on things like catering and venues until we know we can actually gather people together, only because I don't want you to have the risk of a big dollar contract that you get stuck with. Other considerations are that your venue capacity may have changed. Venues are now shifting how many people can be in a space. You may be having to get a lot of space to bring people together, depending upon what their airflow and circulation is like. But you also have different donor comfort levels. Some donors will feel very comfortable being in space and some will not. The number one thing I recommend to assess what your past attendees are most interested in is do a survey. We just were working with a union, a labor union, on some of their gatherings and their events, and they have a big conference event that they do every year, and they had been hearing from a number of board members, we need to get everyone together. People are dying to be in community together. We want everyone to be connected. And so they surveyed their attendees, and they found that 76% of attendees said that they would not attend an in-person event this year. So I think that we still have a lot of folks trying to protect family members and are at home. So it is not a time that simply doing what we always did is going to happen immediately. Other things to think about are, do you need to have health screening stations or vaccination status? Some states allow it, some states don't. Do you need a guest agreement right now? I just bought tickets to attend a sporting event, and I had to sign this giant agreement form that I understood the risk I was taking. And we're just going to have a mixed audience that has different emotional connections to their safety. The one thing I want to highlight is, if you're working with like a corporate hotel, a bigger ballroom space that has a more corporate presence, they may be really restricting that their environment needs to be socially distanced, and that it needs to be a reduced capacity in the room. And suddenly a 500-person ballroom is turning into a 120-person. We have an event happening in Philadelphia that they no longer can accommodate what they thought that they could accommodate. And so in that case, hybrid has become sort of essential for us to consider. So you may have additional expenses of gathering people right now. You may need additional volunteers. You may need to have some safety sort of compliance officers or folks that are in charge of making sure people are safe. You may need a refund policy if a venue can't have you and you've been planning to be there all along. So I think that in 2021, we're still working in this like weird in-between nebulous space. Most organizations we're working with are planning on gathering in 22, and we've heard from sponsors that they're not planning to send attendees of their business to attend an event until likely the end of 2022. So that shrunk down our audiences for a lot of events automatically. So I'm recommending, because of that, because it's just so muddy right now, and the like what you can and can't do isn't clear in so many places, that we're recommending a phased approach. In 2021, we're still planning everything to be virtual, and then we're adding small gatherings as we can. So in one community, we have house parties that are happening. In another community, we have a big watch party. People are getting together in a theater to watch the event. But our traditional sort of sitting around a dinner table, ballroom table, is really not being planned for yet, only because there's still so much open close going on. I do suspect that we're going to start first with hybrid being virtual content viewed in parties and in gatherings, and then it's going to shift to be content from a stage broadcast out to your home, similar to watching like the Academy Awards. We can all have our own mini Academy Awards now. So this is what that looks like in my mind of how an event sort of transforms. The small hybrid event is starting right now with bringing people together in watch parties or viewing parties. So the host or the house broadcasts the event on their TV. Everyone gathers around, they watch, they participate together. It allows there to be restricted gathering sizes. It allows for community. It allows for the host to sort of establish what they feel comfortable with. And it allows you to overlap models of giving. And so the event model is traditionally buy this raffle ticket, buy this auction item, raise your paddle, make a donation. The peer-to-peer model, which is what you use a lot in like runs and walks and athletic events, bike rides, the peer-to-peer model is something that can actually work in a house party environment, because now the host can challenge their guests to compete against other hosts. And the reason why I like that is because, especially in small community, you might now have friends that know each other that are each hosting different virtual events. And Give Lively actually allows you to have a single thermometer, but it also allows you to have a leaderboard to see which party is raising more money. And so now you can kind of gamify fundraising by having small groups together. We've had some folks do this very successfully. The next phase of small hybrid events that we're seeing are in studio audiences. So we're starting to plan for 40 or 50 people watching the broadcast happen. They watch what happens, the broadcast is done, and then they go and have dinner together and celebrate and cocktail party while still having an at-home audience that participates. But I think what we're leading up to is having larger gatherings, staged content, speakers on a stage that gets broadcast to an at-home audience. The number one thing to think about, though, with that, it's not a huge additional cost we've discovered, which is nice. It's probably about $2,500 added to your AV budget. And when you do this, you have camera crews in the room who are sending it out to a live stream feed. You suddenly have to think about what works to be streamed. A cocktail party would not be very exciting to watch at home. You would feel like you were missing out. Dancing would not be very exciting to watch at home. You would be missing out. But the staged content, the speakers at the podium, the videos that you're showing, that all works really well. And so we're recommending that you sort of broadcast just the program piece and then bookend the gathering elements as just for the audience that's in room together. So the dancing, the entertainment, the cocktailing, even the dinner is sort of only for the audience that's gathered. The broadcast, the content happens for the at-home audience. Imagine watching the Golden Globes. It's that same idea. You see that there's a party happening, but you're watching from home and you're participating in just the program. So I think that that's where we're headed. The big shift that we're really starting to think about now is, instead of using quantity of people gathered as a benchmark, we're starting to think more about what is the outcome we are designing for? How are we immersing people in the mission so that when they leave that event, they really feel connected, whether it be that they were watching it at home or virtually, or they were in studio, or they were in the ballroom. We want them to feel really connected and leave there talking about the work of the organization. So we're now designing backwards, from the perspective first of what is the change we want to see, what is the story we want to tell, what is the impact we want to make, and then we're adding the logistics to it as we're able. So we're selling the event date, we're selling the sponsorships, but we're not determining if we're eating in the ballroom or not. We're not making choices about meals and linen colors, because we're not at a place yet where we're gathering people in the ballroom the way we used to. But we're adding that as we go. It's much easier to add. It's much harder to take it away. It's hard to sell out an event and then tell everyone, sorry, regulations change, we can't do it. So that's the transition time we're looking at, is focusing in on the sponsorship and the fundraising appeal, really being focused in on what we can do right now, and then adding as we're able. It's much easier to add in things like small gatherings down the road than it is to sell a big event right now, where everyone wants to know, well, how are you doing it? And what's the capacity of the ballroom? Most of the venues can't even tell you that right now. So the direction I think we're heading, I think we're moving into more community-centric events where we're welcoming everyone into the event. I think that hybrid is going to stay, but the thing that I think is really going to stick around is fundraising in a way that both the in-home audience and the in-ballroom audience can participate in the same way. And that text to give tool is the way to do it. If I'm in the ballroom, I can pick up my cell phone and I can text in my gift. If I'm at home, I can do the same thing. And suddenly we're all getting the same recognition. We're all getting our name on the screen. We're all being recognized no matter what giving size. And that is, I think, the thing that we've learned the most about this time, is that that level of recognition can make a huge difference in the fundraising we're able to do. I also think that we have been deprived. We have been without human connection for so long that people are really craving that human connection. So I think we're going to start to see smaller but more impactful events that really connect people to each other and connect people in conversation. Immersive events that really allow people to be in community together, very focused on mission and story and the experience that you're going to get. Typo error in experience. Sorry about that. And right now, how do you move forward with fundraising? I suggest that you think about the broader community. Everyone is a potential donor. I suggest that you make big, bold asks. We are finding that they're very effective right now. Organizations have had a $500 donor turn into a $5,000 donor simply by making that ask. Direct donor solicitation is really working currently, and most of our big events have been weaving into campaigns very successfully, so that they are setting bigger goals and working over the period of a couple of weeks to reach that goal, not just the single event. So I do think that we are in a space where we're going to see hybrid for a while. So hopefully that answers your question, Cheryl. Sherry, you asked me to get a copy of your presentation. Yes, absolutely. I'll send it to Lyle so he can get it out. I know this is being recorded today as well, so Lyle, you might be able to answer better about how people get access to the recording.
We'll post it in our weekly virtual meeting calendar email, and then we'll have an area on the website where we post all the events from this week.
Excellent. Well, I would love to answer any questions. I know you all are doing so many different style of events, and I've really talked a lot about the sort of gala, breakfast, gathering people in a ballroom style of event. Are there any questions?
I wouldn't mind doing. I just put together a real quick poll, which I am just launching to all of you now. And it's just roughly how many fundraising events does your club hold? And then how much do you think you make from your most successful fundraiser? Now, you may not know. And if you don't worry about answering. But if you do, I am curious. You know, Sam, I think as you've been going through your excellent presentation, we have a whole range of fundraisers. We have a lot of fundraisers that I think are in the $2,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 range. And we have some that are more successful than that. I think people are looking for any sorts of ideas that they can for any of those sorts of things.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to share, while everyone's filling out the poll, I want to share one other resource, well, two resources. So first, we have a conference that we do every year to help people figure out how to raise more money at their fundraising events. It's coming up just in another week or so. And so Elevate is the name of the conference. I just wanted to let folks know that we have Priya Parker as one of our keynotes, and she wrote this incredible book that you get as a download if you join us. But I encourage you to look at this book called The Art of Gathering. And she wrote this pre-pandemic, but she's been doing a lot of great work post-pandemic about how do we make gatherings more meaningful. And we found a lot of inspiration in this. So I wanted to share that book. It's what we're reading most these days. It's a great resource.
Great. I did just share the results from the poll, and you can see that of the, let's see, 26 people that said how many events has your club raised, 17 of them, or 2/3 of them, are holding only 1 or 2 events a year. And on the most successful area, we have 9 clubs that are raising, between $25,000 and $75,000 on an event. A couple of events that are over $75,000, but you can see we've got a lot that are in the 2 to 4 to 10 sort of range. So just wanted to do that, Sam, and just give people a sense. Let's take questions here, please.
Yeah, how can I help? What events do you have coming up? What struggles have you run into with events? What questions do you have?
Yeah, I got a question. What's hot and what's not? In other words, it seems like golf outings aren't hot anymore. Maybe 5K races are not hot anymore. I mean, what kind of events are hot now and what aren't?
Types of events or types of auction items, or both?
No, I'm talking about events themselves.
Events.
You would, yeah.
Yeah, so the number one thing, well, there's 2 style of events that we've been seeing through COVID that are both virtual. So converting the virtual, or converting the traditional sort of gala, lunch, breakfast style event into a 1-hour TV show. That's the number one thing we're seeing. And the other thing we're seeing a lot of is the group get together via Zoom, sort of present content about the work that we're doing and then ask for giving. Those are the 2 biggest areas that we're seeing. The one that's coming back really strong right now has been things like runs and walks. That, because I think it's summer, people are going to be outside. People are really looking at that as a way to start bringing community together. But I suspect that the biggest thing that we're going to start to see is smaller gatherings are going to be the thing that's hot. So being able to get together, John, I want to be on your patio at your house with your Irish whiskey. That type of gathering is going to be the thing that's more compelling than 3,000 people in a park. We're even seeing it with gatherings like weddings and birthday parties. They're becoming much smaller and more intimate. And that's where I think that we're going to see kind of hot events right now are bringing people together for an experience. So if you can immerse me in something like you're going to teach me all about Irish whiskey and you're going to pour 4 different types of tastings, that's much more compelling than the spending all day in a field game scenario, participating in various sports and athletic events. Mostly because you're getting a immersed experience where you're learning something, you're connecting to people. That is the sort of big trend we're seeing right now.
Oh, Colleen, I love your question. We are less than technically adept. Does using technical assistance programs usurp too much of the profits to make it worth it?
Great question. There are 2, well, there are more than 2. There are several recommendations that I have that are free resources. The first one is Give Lively. It's a free tool that allows you to do the fundraising thermometer and text to give. That's why I recommend it, because it's free. It's also very user-friendly and intuitive to use. There are two other tools like that. Give Butter is a similar tool. I actually think that I know a number of Rotaries that use Give Butter. The nice thing about Give Butter is they've actually been building in more for virtual events, like how can you embed video content and things like that. Those are both free. You can, with Give Butter, add on features for a cost. And then the biggest resource to do this sort of virtual content, or to gather people in small space and do virtual content, that I find is using a live streaming partner. The AV department is who I recommend the most, because they are the cheapest and they're so good at what they do, and they exclusively work with nonprofits. They're $3,500 to host your webpage, broadcast your whole event, and do all your technical management. So for those who are less than technically adept and feel overwhelmed by the stress of it, I call the AV department and they deliver every single time.
Yeah. You know, Sam, though, you brought up a good point, and it's something that I've been emphasizing as I've talked to people. I get lots of requests to attend your fundraising events, and I get them from Eventbrite, and I get them from Greater Giving, I get them from Give Lively, I get them from Rally Up. And honestly, doesn't it always appear to me that the people putting those events on, or just choosing them, are thinking about the cost of them? It amazes me when it's costing 8%, 9% of the cost of what you are collecting to just get the money. And I got to tell you, if I get a request that says, I would like you to give to this cause, I would like you to pay the fees. Oh, and by the way, the fees are 12%. There's got to be a better way. So we've got to find some ways as a district and between us to share those cheaper, nicer options, Sam, like you were talking about.
Yes, I 100% agree with that, which I'm going to put another ringing endorsement in for Give Lively, because they actually allow the donor to pick up the fee, which I love. So when I'm making $1,000 gift, it's like a $4, $6 processing fee. So you see donors often saying yes and checking that box, which means you get more of the profits, which is not true with most credit card processing tools out there.
Yeah. One thing I will point out, I think about Give Lively, Sam, is it's got to be a 501c3 that they work.
It does.
And
it does.
We have tomorrow morning for some of you that are going to participate also. All right, more questions.
Well, let me share with you too, Give Butter. It is as weird as it sounds, Give Butter, just like butter on your bread, because you do not have to be a 501c3, and you could be a C4, a C6, an association, and they have a free service that's very robust, and then add-on services for pretty minimal cost.
Good.
Samantha, you mentioned a couple of times the AV department as the live streaming partner. Could you elaborate on who that is, where they operate? I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, I just sent a link in the chat. The AVDEPT is their website. And they are a company that works nationally with nonprofits. So they are solely focused on fundraising events. That's all they do. And so any element that you need prepared for your fundraising event, if you say, hey, we want to do this thing, or we have this idea, they will help you navigate the technology behind it. And they are $3,500. They only work with the fundraising sector. So they're not also doing like, big weddings or events tied to, sporting events, or they're just doing fundraising events. So they're the experts. They're really affordable. Highly recommend them.
$3,500 covers what kind of an event?
That is to do a live streamed virtual event or a hybrid event. You could stream from your event. And what they're going to do is they're going to host the stream. They're going to build the website for your stream to be on. And they're going to manage all the technical of showing the thermometer. When your host says, let's check out the thermometer, they're like the TV production crew in the studio. They're going to show the thermometer. They're going to show the name of the speaker across the screen. So they're going to make your event in a virtual setting very interactive, and they will also host the website that is a landing page for that event.
They operate in the Chicago area a lot.
They do. They have lots of folks that are in Chicago and Michigan and Indiana. We've done a number of events with them, folks actually in your area. Well, I would say mostly the Chicago and northeastern corner of Illinois. And like I said, down into Indiana and Ohio, but they work nationally. So they're based out of the Portland, Oregon area, but they work all around the country.
Yeah. Linda, I love your question too about the Taste of Evanston. Do you want to unmute and ask it, or do you just want me to read it?
I'm glad to read it. So we have a Taste of Evanston event, our 7th one this year. Our numbers are great. That means we're about 70% vaccinated in our town. And our incidents of COVID are very, very low. So we thought it was a good time to resume the in-person, face-to-face event.
Right.
And we considered doing live stream or having an in-person and then have an online event afterwards. But we thought that it was unnecessary, but you're showing us all the benefits of doing something like that.
Yeah, tell me, with the Taste of Evanston, are you doing a stage program or an auction or raffles?
We were going to have an auction, and we were not going to have a stage because we didn't want to have people congregate in one area.
Got it. So here are a couple of solutions for you if you are interested in expanding. Obviously, the reason why people are coming to the Taste of Evanston is the taste, right? That's the experience. And so that restricts your revenue to the tickets and the items that people can buy there. So if people aren't showing up there, you could easily host an online raffle as an alternative, or host an online auction as an alternative to going to the event. But if you had programming elements that you wanted to share, like speeches from the stage, or a call to, text to give, sort of telethon model, you could have screens at the event. Instead of a main stage, you could have screens, and you could have that broadcast at home. So I think it is possible. It is really a matter of what your revenue model is built off of. If the majority of your revenue model is simply the ticket, then I suspect that you're really relying on that ticket and people showing up. But if you have revenue associated with buying items, raffles, auctions, participating in games, or giving in like a paddle race scenario, all of those can be done virtually really easily.
The bulk of our income has been from sponsorships.
Oh, great. Well, then if you had a virtual component at all, that's another asset you can sell to your sponsors. The sponsor is fee for benefit. They're buying marketing time. They're buying marketing dollars. And so now in the virtual space, if you have an event that you're hosting, you can promote it online, you can have social media online, but now you could have things like television commercials for the sponsor or a word from the sponsor. So if sponsor is a big benefit, you may want to consider the Taste of Evanston doing a small virtual element, whether it just be that it's a 20-minute tune in and find out who the winner is, and we're going to hear from our sponsors, or it may be that it's a bigger program that you're doing. But if sponsors your big revenue, that may be very compelling to sponsors.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up here towards the 8 o'clock hour, and Sam has agreed that she'll stay on for a while. But I do want to take a minute, and I want to highlight some of the things that I thought were particularly intriguing this year, because we had some wonderful, wonderful ideas. The one club that I thought really was creative this year was Carpentersville Morning. And Carpentersville Morning is a small club. They had, and I need to share my screen here once I get it back up. They did, once I find it here again, there we go. There. They did this beautiful thing called the Angel Share program. And the Angel Share was a sampler case of different bourbons. They had a gentleman in town who was an expert on bourbon, and you got your cases, and he then did an online tasting with other people to take you through it. And they, of course, recorded it so that you could watch it later on. The thing that was so interesting from my standpoint is that I have my case right here. Look at some of the bottles, you'd see that they are now empty, if you could see them, because we did them with our kids, and then I did them that night. It was just a really nice idea. They've got another idea that's coming up here with a blind tasting for bourbon. They have, they've done 3 or 4 really intriguing things this year, and I want to commend them for that. But they weren't the only ones. You know, the McHenry Area Club has always done the Blues, Brews, and Barbecue. That wasn't happening last year. What they did was work with the McHenry Drive-In, had a number of bands that came to the McHenry Drive-In. They had other bands that live streamed from a garage downtown and were projected on the live screen at the Drive-In. It was a really fun event, and they were able to tie in their auction and some of their other things. We saw a lot of team challenges. We saw a lot of music bingos. We saw virtual benefit concerts. Huntley did one for polio that was really very good. Northwest Supper live streamed, live streamed assassinating a pumpkin. They did for polio again. Did you bet to see how many rubber bands it took to actually have a pumpkin implode? It was really a lot of fun. So there were lots of different ideas that came in. Some of them were very highly produced. You know, Schaumburg Hoffman Estates always has a wonderful auction. That was very, very highly produced. But there were some that were just done by the club, taking their normal event, putting them online and doing some twists. The River Cities Club did the best job that I saw of taking their normal reverse raffle, Rotary, 5,000, whatever you want to call it, and making it fun. They had a band. They had lots of interesting banter. They had a few people that were in the audience. You know, it was just a way to do things differently. So I want to commend the clubs that did find ways to do things differently this year. And somebody said, drive-ins still exist. Yeah, we've got, we have the one in McHenry, and I think one in Carroll Stream or West Chicago is opening back up, I had heard.
Well, Lyle, I want to show you, this is a fundraising event that was held here in our community that was a drive-in gala. And so you had your choice of participating by driving in or by tuning in from home. The program on the big screen was the same. This is the at-home viewing screen. But it was so fun. And those who showed up, this is a photo of the cars in the background that showed up at the event. They all got a fun like goodie basket when they pulled in, and they got their own parking spot. And when we tuned in from home, you could see all the cars, and the cars were honking. It was so fun. And it was such a simple way to still have that same experience in sort of your own bubble of your car, which was kind of neat.
And you didn't have to do it at a real drive-in. Yep, Linda talks about what Evanston did. The two, now we have 3 Evanston clubs. That's a different story for a different article. But the Evanston Club and the Evanston Lighthouse Club went in together. They had drive-ins that happened, I think, at one of the local car dealers, Linda, I think. And it was really a great event. But you can do a drive-in anywhere right now.
Yeah, you just need a screen big enough to be able to see. You know, it can be a wall of a building that you can project on for a drive-in. It can be so simple. I wanted to address too, real quick, Linda's question. I want to go back to Taste of Evanston because it ties directly into what you just said, Lyle, about the Angels Taste event. And the reason why that was so compelling. First of all, I would join that event in a heartbeat. I'm a huge bourbon fan. And anytime you say that the Angels share them in. But so if that's your event, invite me to it. I'll be there in a second. But with that event, the thing that made it so interesting was that you got to experience something together, right? You got to be a part of something. So if you wanted to make the Taste of Evanston virtual, you could send a taste box home, have a short program that is a tasting experience where someone talks about the wine that they've paired with this cheese, or someone talks about the barbecue sauce they've used. in the dip, and you could have a fun tasting experience as part of your program. That's the Taste of Evanston from home. That would then give you the TV broadcast element that you could add all your sponsors into. So really compelling way to give people that experience of being a part of something, being recognized as a donor, and making a difference. So that could be an interesting solution for you, Linda.
Great, great.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Sam here? So I'm just curious, have you gotten any ideas from this? Has it started you thinking about doing anything differently with your fundraisers this year?
We already set our fundraiser for September, which is going to be a band, not really a battle of bands, but we're going to bring in some bands, and we're going to do it over at Gilson Park at the Wallace Bowl. It's going to be outside, so that we get around the social distancing kind of thing, and that's going to be our major fun. Last fall we did a virtual 5K, and we cleared about somewhere between $13,000 and $15,000 in that. There's an entry fee if you want to run, and then there's or walk, whatever you want to do for the 5K, and then we all got donors to contribute so much per mile, and that worked out well. And our only expense really was posters and T-shirts. If you paid the entry fee, you got a T-shirt, Wilmette Rotary T-shirt, themed T-shirt. And but the idea you've given me, and I've seen this. There's a fellow in the Chicago area that does the fluid history of Irish whiskey, which is that would be, I think, that could be a good fundraiser. The only problem is many of our members, I don't think, are into heavy imbibing. And this was not heavy imbibing. I mean, it's all, little drams worth. But that's an interesting thought. I'm going to go to our.
I'll give you another example of a club that I thought was really creative. Libertyville Sunrise normally has this North Shore craft beer, wine, and cigar tasting event. It's a big deal for them. They couldn't do it this last year. They found a way to do limited numbers of people coming to a wine tasting. They did multiple shifts in a day. That worked out very well for them. And they said, I talked to them the other day, they're going to do that again this year. They don't know that they're ready to do the big craft beer event. One thing I do want to point out to you all is that you should be aware of clubs that have events like yours and go to them. So I'll use the craft beer event that Libertyville does. Elgin Breakfast does a wonderful craft beer event. I think St. Charles Noon used to do, or Breakfast, did a craft beer event. Park Ridge has done a craft beer event. You ought to be talking. Sometimes you can use the same vendors. And I'll tell you that when I go to some of these events, I say, this was really a neat idea that they should be using. You should reach out to other clubs and find ways to share resources, expenses, whatever. A great example of that, I think Northbrook and Buffalo Grove both do duck races. At one time, I know they were collaborating on some of the promotional materials for some of that stuff. Or maybe they could even share ducks, heck, I don't know. But you don't have to go alone. Please find a way to share some information and seek out what's going out elsewhere. The best thing you should do is go to some of these other clubs' events and just see what they're doing, because you'll get lots of ideas. Have we any other questions for Sam? I see none. Sam, I want to thank you so much. I think you've really got us thinking here, and that's what we wanted to do. As I said at the very beginning, the key here is money is the lubricant for the good we do. And the more money that we can raise, and the simpler it is for us to raise more money, then we can get to what we really want to do, which is do good. So thank you very much. If you have any other questions, we'll send the link, we'll send the video or the slides, we'll make them available. And Sam, again, it is a pleasure to listen to you. I'm sure we'll be talking again in the future sometime.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for the good work you do out in the world.
Okay, great. Okay,
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
thanks all. Take care. And I am going to end this call in 5 seconds.